Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a former Boeing 737 pilot, and welcome to the landing tutorial for the iFly Boeing 737 MAX. We currently have our simulator paused on approximately a 3 nautical mile final to runway 28 right in San Francisco. We're established on a stabilized approach with the autopilot engaged, and once we are going to resume the simulation, I am going to disconnect the autopilot and we will fly a manual approach and landing in the Boeing 737. So, how are we going to do that? The most important thing is to maintain a stabilized approach. And many flight simmers do the mistake that they, for some reason, are moving the control column all over the place. As long as there is no turbulence outside and no wind variations and stuff like that, you do not need to do a single input on the control column. An airplane that is trimmed out is just going to fly straight ahead without any inputs. I know that you have probably seen many videos on the internet of pilots that are smashing their control column all over the place, but that is not a correct operating technique, and in most cases is not required to maintain a stabilized approach. Do not fall for this trap, much rather only do small inputs on your control column, just as needed to correct for any deviations you may encounter, and the same goes for your thrust. Keep that pretty much exactly where it is, and if you need to do adjustments, only make a couple percent. If 51 is your base value over here at which you maintain the airspeed stable, then maybe correct 2 or 3% N1 and no more than that. The same goes for your attitude. If you need to correct, don't chase the needles, much rather just change the pitch a bit, let's say about half a degree up or down, and see what the airplane is gonna do. But do not chase any of those needles, that is not going to work. In order for a successful landing, we need to have some certain base data. We need to cross the landing runway threshold at the published threshold crossing height, which is usually 50 feet above the threshold. Unfortunately, many flight simulator sceneries have an incorrect glide slope or an incorrect PAPI that might be misleading, so you have to ignore the glide slope and the PAPI a little bit on the short final and just look outside and land the plane like that. That's unfortunately a limitation of Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, as we're approaching the flare itself, be sure that you enter the last 50 feet at an appropriate vertical speed and at an appropriate attitude. That is the key for a successful landing. You want to have that vertical speed at roughly 800 and the pitch at roughly 0.51 degrees in a flaps 30 configuration or 0 degrees in a flaps 40 configuration. At 50 feet radio, you do nothing. At 40 feet radio, nothing. 30, nothing. 20, that is when you pitch up approximately 1, maximum 2 degrees. Pull your engines to idle so that they reach idle latest by the time the aircraft touches down, but don't just yank them to idle. That is almost guaranteed in the real life to cause a positive landing. So slowly and smoothly reduce the thrust to idle so that the thrust reaches idle by the time you touch down. A soft landing is no criterion for a good landing. Much rather smash the aircraft onto the aiming point. That's the important thing. Once you have developed a feeling for how to place the aircraft where you want it on the runway, then you can work on getting your flare a little bit smoother, but don't hold the aircraft off in the flare, much rather fly it down onto the runway. I know, those virtual airlines and flight trackers always tell you it's a bad landing if you do 200 feet a minute. It is not at all. 300, acceptable. 400, positive but acceptable. 500, yeah, that's where it slowly starts getting into the region where things are problematic. But anything up to that, the airplane is not gonna suffer, and it is even reusable. That's all you can ask for. Alright, so remember the basics. Only small control inputs. The same goes for the thrust. Maintain your attitude and only do small changes to the attitude in order to correct for localizer or glide slope deviations, but do not chase the needles. Be sure to end up passing the runway threshold in a stable state. At 50 feet, shift your point of view towards the end of the runway and use your peripheral vision, that is monitoring the runway edges as they come up towards the edges of your point of view, together with the radio altimeter to judge your height. At 20 feet, just pitch up by about a degree, maximum 2, and smoothly pull the thrust to idle so that it reaches idle on touchdown. And that is the entire trick to it. Alright, let's go ahead and give this a go. So,
1000.
checked. Number 1, auto throttle off. Here we go. Number 2, autopilot off. And now let's give it a go. So, the flight director does give you some good hints over here if you are deviating slightly. Like, here we go. And now the trick is just to maintain the entire aircraft stable. A small speed deviation is acceptable, a large one is not. But, as you can see, I'm just doing small corrections there in order to maintain my approach configuration. Just very small inputs.
400.
So, aim to be exactly on target as you're crossing the runway threshold. Now we're losing a bit of speed. You can see I'm adding a couple percent N1, but not too many.
Approaching minimum.
Checked.
200.
Getting slightly above the glide, very slight pitch down. And that is all you need. Alright,
50,
nothing,
40,
nothing,
30,
nothing.
20.
Pitch up a
10.
tiny bit, power to idle, and hold it. Fly it onto the ground, don't hold it off. And here we are. Smoothly line the plane with the center line and fly that nose wheel down. And then, thrust reverser selected, speed brakes are up. 100 knots. When you see your exit approaching, brake as needed to catch the exit. 80 knots. And that's the rapid exit taxiway we want to take. We can enter the rapid exit taxiway at 55 knots or less. Most pilots want to use 45 or less, so just to have that in mind. And here we go, vacating the runway while slowing the plane down further, and only once you reach normal taxi speeds, that is when we are going to stow the thrust reversers again. Alright, and that is the runway vacated. Let's go ahead and cross 28 left over here straight away so that we don't have to stop on the runways. Of course, an ATC clearance is required to do this. And with that, we are nicely vacating. I will bring the aircraft to a complete stop once we've vacated the runway on the other end side so that we can deal with the after landing procedures, but that is going to be for the dedicated taxi in video. So, thank you very much for watching. I do hope you learned something today. As you vacate the runway, be sure that the entire aircraft is beyond the line. So this is not an acceptable stopping point. We need to go further forward until the entire aircraft is behind the stop line. Like this. Over here we can stop. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this one interesting. As always, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.